iHeartRadio Broadway, driven by Mercedes-Benz.
So first and foremost, thank you both for joining me today on this lovely Sunday afternoon. We are here to announce a really, really special thing, that the Stages podcast is coming to iHeart Broadway, but also the iHeart Podcast Network. So how excited are the two of you that you are joining our network?
Well, I'm thrilled. I mean, when I understand that the iHeartRadio family reaches 9 out of 10 humans, that's an incredible, understanding. And we feel like our podcast is such that really, if 9 out of those 10 could listen, there's something to enjoy or benefit from, and vice versa. The conversations, I think, are that special and important, and I'm just grateful. I'm grateful we have your platform to help us get this wonderful message and mission out there.
Yeah, we're so grateful, because the other wonderful thing about it is that it'll reach it'll reach a much wider audience than just a Broadway niche, which I think is important with this podcast, because we talk about spirituality and motherhood and creativity and just being human and struggling in the world every day. And we've had guests tell us such personal things and go to such vulnerable places, and we're so honored by that and by the people that have said yes to us. And so we're just really excited to be able to partner up with you and share it with even more people.
And before we get into the guests that you've had and what the podcast really is, how did the Stages podcast come to be? Because you both are two extremely busy women, professionals, and I'm just curious, what was the exciting incident that brought the two of you together to create this podcast?
Gosh, I hope this doesn't sound cliche, but the world stopped. We both were so very active up until March of 2020. And culturally, artistically, as mothers, we were wonderful, productive hamsters in the wheel of life, right? And then COVID hit. And being a body in motion, when you stop like that, you have so much time to think, you have so much time to reflect, and you have so much time to pay attention. And Marylee paid attention to me, and she said, "You seem sad. What is going on?" And I said, "I'm missing creativity. I'm missing inspiration. I'm missing connection." And she said, "Well, let's fix that." And within, I would say, 3 weeks, we had a concept, we had the name. Knowing Marylee, we had a lawyer. We started to get guests that were just our pals, that were feeling similarly and wanted to have these conversations. And away we went. And we were very, very clear right off the bat that it wasn't going to be a discussion about, oh, look at all the things I did. Look at my resume. Look at my achievements.
What I'm working on.
Yeah. The word stages is really about stages in life. And COVID allowed us to look at that and go, how as artists, how as creatives and healers and designers are we approaching this wild stage of life? Which then these conversations went into, mourning the death of a loved one, or celebrating the birth of a child, or there's so many stages. And because of the organic way these conversations started, as Marylee just said, they became these really deep wells of emotion, of enlightenment, and we trusted them, and our guests trusted us, and it took off in ways that we just weren't even anticipating.
Yeah. And Marylee, with this podcast, listening to the conversations that you've had with these guests, they are so not typical conversations, and I think that's why I love this podcast so much, because yes, they are our Broadway pals. They're the people that you recognize from the Broadway community, but you two are going into such in-depth conversations, and there are things that your guests are talking about that are eye-opening for your listeners. And I'm curious, that's not an easy thing to do as a host. And I'm curious, what's the process for the two of you to work together to kind of bring those conversations out with your guests?
You know what I think? I think that everything we learn along the way in life plays into a greater destiny, right? And when you find those things where you can gather up a little bit of everything you learned in all the different stages, whether they were good stages or challenging stages or, easy stages, when you gather them all up and you can create something from that, it's very organic and real.
Mm-hmm.
And when I had my son, I backed away from the theater for a little bit because I wanted to be home with my son. And I started really diving into yoga. And I started teaching yoga and studying yoga. And those concepts, I just feel like when you allow yourself vulnerability and honesty, you open that door for other people.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's sort of the secret sauce with Stephanie. Stephanie and I have always been really vulnerable with each other. We've called each other at different stages in our life when things were not going well, or we were struggling, or trying to make a decision. We were always like kind of big sister, little sister that way. And I think that honesty and vulnerability during COVID, when we were having these conversations, because we were both struggling in our own way, that led to something wonderful. And it was a very conscious choice to say, we're going to be that honest in the world, because it allows people to drop the veneer of social media, which is everything's so curated, and just have a little truth. And I think the world needs more of that. And that it was literally in our mission statement that we were just going to try and put a little good in a world that feels very precarious and topsy-turvy a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And this podcast does feel like we're kind of onlookers into just three friends sitting around and having a cup of coffee. And that's what's so wonderful about it, because it doesn't feel fake. It is so raw and so honest that it does feel like we are just coming into a wonderful conversation with friends.
And we are always surprised, not by that, but we're always surprised with the path that the conversation goes.
Yeah.
Because
It's never where we think, ever.
No, because we one way. Exactly. This is what I was just going to say, ML. We prepare because we are both. We want to make sure that there is integrity in every single conversation. We want to make sure that we are not just coming airy fairy. That this opportunity does have preparedness to it. But with the very first question, whether it disarms them or not, we quickly realize, okay, we just need to listen. And then we need to react with what's being said. And then we need to invest as much as our guest and our listeners are investing. I find that so many hosts perhaps might prepare and stick so closely to what that conversation is going to be, whether it's promoting a new show, whether it's promoting a new book, whether it's talking only about one facet of this very multifaceted disco ball of a human we're talking about, right? And if we just come to the table not ready, thinking we know exactly how it's going to end, and we just listen, the surprises along the way and the authentic journey that every conversation is going to have is what I think is the beautiful surprise. So I try to always lead with a question that's a little bit disarming. Right off the bat, just to set the tone. And then with every interview, we have our 5 questions at the end that are kind of off the cusp, wackadoodle. It always takes our guest by surprise, and always is this sort of beautiful, we've diffused whatever we've just talked about. It's like a really beautiful palate cleanser to then send everybody off into the world, kind of reset. So that's what I feel is important, is no matter how hard you prepare, just be quiet and listen and respond. And as actors, that's what we're told to do too. So I feel like because ML and myself are both coming from that acting world, that really does play into being quote unquote hosts. Because it really, like you just said, is a conversation with friends. And if they're not friends with us at the tip top, if we're just getting to know each other, there is a relationship that's been formed within those 35, 45 minutes.
Yeah.
Is there...
I can't tell you how many times I've finished an interview and left my office, and my husband and son are like, here she goes again. Because I'm like, I love that person. This person is going to be my new friend. I just love them. I'm so happy I got to meet them. And I cannot tell you how many times I've said that, and actually have formed like lovely friendships.
Yeah, you're stealing my friends.
With your
You better
newfound
maintain our friendship, Steph, or you'll be history, my friend. I can
It's
teach
true.
you
It's
for all
true.
my new
It's true.
friends.
Yeah, she has more to offer than I do.
with your newfound friends, is there a podcast episode that has stuck with you for a really long time, that the conversation just went in? I have one from the two of you that I'm not going to throw out there right now, but is there an episode that has just stayed with you for a really long time?
I have a few that immediately came to mind.
Yeah.
So Kiala is one of our first ones, but her openness, her vulnerability, her passion with which she spoke was really mind-blowing.
Mhm.
Danny Burstein, how
Mhm.
open he
That-
was about
That's mine.
his family, and
Mhm.
how he said yes to us in a moment in his life where he really was facing a lot of familial grief, a lot of loss from, losing Rebecca. That was an extraordinary. I felt so honored to just be in the same moment in time with
Mhm.
Danny. And then most recently, we sat down with Michaela Diamond, and she knocked my socks off with her self-awareness and her willingness to kind of just stream of consciousness, but then sit in a pocket and then recite a poem that she wrote. It was such a glorious hour. Those are the three that just kind of went boom, boom, boom right off the bat.
I think for me, speaking with James Lapine was
Oh,
a
of
big
course.
one, because Sunday in the Park with George was such a massive influence in my life. And until to be able to talk with him about the process, and he was so not who I thought he would be. He was so normal and open and funny. And so that was a big one for me. Recently, we spoke with Gavin Creel, which hasn't come out yet, but wow, that conversation.
Stupid genius, Gavin.
Yeah,
Creel.
no, he's another one. I keep walking around the house going, oh my God, I just love him. My husband's like,
Yeah.
stop talking about him. I can't help, but I love him
Yeah.
because I'm editing his right now. So he's just in my ear. And I also loved, we spoke with this woman, Cara Belvin, who's not in the theater. She's not, but she started a foundation for girls that have lost their moms. And she went from 9 girls on the South Shore of Massachusetts to literally across the United States. She's helping thousands and thousands of young girls cope with the loss of their mom. That one was really moving for me as well.
Yes.
Yeah, it's been a real honor to talk to a lot of these people.
And I will say that Danny's interview with the two of you is one that has honestly stayed with me for a very long time from the Stages podcast. His openness, his vulnerability with talking about his life and moving forward with his life right now was just one of the most beautiful conversations that I've had the privilege to listen to. But also your interview with Annalee Ashford, I thought was also, we all know Annalee is this, warm and funny, beautiful actress, but then for her to talk about body image and for her also talk about her upbringing, you don't get that type of conversation in just a regular interview with Annalee. So I thought that was such an amazing interview to hear the three of you speak upon. And again, these are the conversations that, yes, you're talking to your Broadway pals and beyond, but I'm always amazed at the openness and the truth that your guests bring to this podcast. And I think that's just a testament to the two of you being such warm individuals to bring these guests onto your podcast.
That's the best compliment we could receive.
Kind of you.
For sure.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, with that, do you want to tell everyone where to find the Stages podcast before we talk about it on iHeartRadio Broadway.com?
Well, you can find us at stagespodcast.net, and you can sign up for our weekly news drop there. And we're on every place that you can stream podcasts. Nothing's going to change for our listeners. I don't want people to feel like they have to go find us somewhere, because we're still going to be everywhere, but we just have this new amazing partnership.
So starting today, you're going to be able to listen to Stages podcast on iHeartRadioBroadway.com, but also the iHeart Podcast Network. So if you go to iHeart.net.com, iHeart.com, you can find the Stages podcast on our platform. And I'm so thrilled. You're going to hear segments of it on the iHeart Broadway station, on our social channels, etc. But we are so thrilled to welcome the Stages podcast and you two beautiful human beings on our platform. So I'm so excited.
Oh, the privilege is ours. Thank you so much. Thank you so, so much.
And again, you two are busy people, so I appreciate you taking the time on this Sunday afternoon. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
iHeartRadio Broadway, driven by Mercedes-Benz.